Butterfly by Pavel Friedman, age 12, April 6, 1942. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzlingly. Yellow, perhaps if the sun's tears would sink against a white stone. Such a yellow is carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. For 7 weeks, I've lived here, penned up inside this ghetto. But I have found my people here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut candles in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live here in the ghetto.
Please rise. El Malei Rachamim is traditionally chanted at funerals. In Yom HaShoah, there's a special El Malei Rachamim for the 6 million. We ask God, who we name as a God of compassion, a God of love, a God of mercy, to give us the strength, to give us the courage, to give us the power to bring love and mercy into the world in the deepest possible ways. And the community that we build in this school and in this temple gives us hope and gives us strength and gives us courage to know that despite the wickedness and evil that we see in the world, we know that there's a world of love. We know that there's compassion. We know that there's goodness. Our students give us that strength. Our teachers give us that strength. Our guest today is going to share and give his own testimony that can give us the strength to know that there is goodness in the world. And so we give thanks to God for all the goodness in the world, even as we remember. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen B'Chromim, Amtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, B'malot Kedoshim Tehurim, Kizor Harakim Asirim, Et Nishmot Shel Sheshet Milyonei Yehudim, Chalelei HaShoah שהלכו לעולמם, ברחמים, יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום על משכבם ונאמר Amen.
Our students this week spoke a lot about memory, and one of the things that they spoke about in their classes was that memory conveys a certain responsibility. But they also noted that memory is more than just a responsibility of ours. It's also an opportunity to realize who we are. If we don't remember where we came from as a people, if we don't remember where we've been, we don't really know or understand what it means to be Jewish. And our students recognized in their classes that the Shoah, the 6 million, and perhaps the 6 million who would have followed them, and then the 12 million who would have followed them, are a part of our story. And what it means to be Jewish in America today is intricately tied up with that memory. And so I'm going to ask you to join me as we honor their memory with the mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadam v'yitkadash me'erah, v'yamad yivra v'yoteh, v'yichlamoteh, v'chayecho v'yomecho, v'chaye v'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman v'kariv v'yimud amen. Yehei shmei rabbah v'rach v'olam v'olei omayim. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbarach v'yitshomah v'yitnaseh. Yitadar, Yitaleh, Yitaleh, Shmei, Kedisha, Richu, Elam, Klo, Mirchata, Shirata, Tushbachata, Belechamata, Tamimah, Yamah, Yimu, Amen. Yehei Shlama, Rabba, Yishma, V'chaim, Malek, Ya'kol Yisrael, Yimu, Amen. Say Shalom, Say Shalom, Ya'kol Yisrael, Yimu, Amen.
Dear Kitty, I see the world gradually being turned into wilderness. I hear the approaching thunder. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look into the heavens, I think that it will all come out right one of these days, that this cruelty will end and that peace and tranquility will return again. In memory of Anne Frank and 1,000,000 Jews.
I was the head of an orphanage in Warsaw and an emulated and respected children's author. One day, the Nazis came and took us to Treblinka. When offered my freedom, I told them I could not leave my children. In memory of Janusz Korczak and 1,000,000 Jews.
The following lines are from the last song I wrote after I was parachuted into a partisan camp in Yugoslavia. Ashrei hagafrur shenisraf v'yitzi lahava. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the secret fastness of the heart. Blessed is the heart with strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. In memory of Hannah Senich and 1,000,000 Jews.
Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp, which has turned my life into one long night. 7 times cursed and 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget the faces of the children whose bodies I soon turned wreaths of smoke beneath the silent blue sky. Never shall I forget those flames which consume my faith forever. Never shall I forget that nocturnal silence which deprived me for all eternity of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments which murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to dust. Never shall I forget these things, even if I am condemned to live as long as God himself, in honor of Elie Wiesel and in memory of 1,000,000 Jews.
Three months before my parents' wedding, my great-grandma Sophie was hit by a school bus in a crosswalk. The doctor said she would never walk again. But 3 months later, she danced at their wedding, saying, "If Hitler couldn't kill me, a bus has no chance." I am lighting this candle in loving memory of my great-grandma, Sophie Zeitman Hamburger. Her courage, strength, and amazing spirit made her a hero. She survived Auschwitz, escaping the death march, and went on to become a wife, loving mother, devoted grandmother, and very proud great-grandmother. She shared her story with so many people everywhere, hoping it would prevent something so terrible from ever happening again to anyone. She died a year ago at age 94, brave and strong and surrounded by her loved ones. We miss you and will never forget you. In memory of my Bubby and 1,000,000 Jews.
My great-great-uncle Max is a survivor of the Holocaust. He survived 12 labor camps and 6 concentration camps, including Auschwitz-Birkenau. There at Auschwitz, he met Nathan Chappelle, a lifelong friend and partner who fought for survival alongside Max, even through encounters with Joseph Mengele and the infamous Death March of 1944. Uncle Max knows that God has been giving him the ability to live and thrive, and knowing that, he promised to help all those less fortunate, and has kept that commitment over the years by giving his time and money to many worthy causes and organizations. Last year, he gave us something just as special, his story and his history. We learned about how life was during the Holocaust and how life was at concentration camps. Today, he is still alive at the age of 98, and may my great-great-uncle Max live to be 120 and continue to positively influence the lives of many. In honor of my great-uncle Max and in memory of 1,000,000 Jews.
The seventh candle is lit in honor of our guest speaker today, Leon Prochnik. Leon, this is the candle of love, hope that you'll be bringing with your story today. And we are honored and privileged. As you said, Milka, I mean Malka, when we met in July, to hear the story that will inspire us and will become part of our narrative.
So, yes, Yom HaShoah today. I'm very honored to be here. I want to thank Malka Clement. What do you call Malka Clement in school? Do you call her Miss Clement or Malka? Miss Clement. Excuse me. It's interesting because Malka's name is very close to a name you're going to be hearing during my talk, and that is Milka. Milka was, as you'll find out, was a chocolate bar and a chocolate tub that played an important part in my life. Okay, so let me begin. Let's see what we have. Okay, now, as I've asked many times, who is that? Oops, yes, wild guesses? Who is it? How do you know? Is it those gorgeous clothes and handsome imperious clothes? That actually is a picture of me on my 6th birthday. It's May 31st, 1939. So I know exactly what day it was. We are in Krakow in the main square, whose name I never bothered to memorize. But it's a famous place, and people come there and feed pigeons. It's a little bit like what they do in Venice in Italy. So I would be brought here by my nanny, by my governess, pretty often, probably at least once a week. And I would feed the pigeons. But it wasn't just feeding the pigeons, because I had this way as a child of sort of imagining things. I would get caught by something going on around me, and that would become very real for me. You'd not see a cloud, and there would be, it might look like a lion, and there'd be another cloud that looked like a lamb, and then I would stand there kind of trying to will those two together, just standing there and staring. And when I stare, my mouth would come open. So I spent a lot of time. I was glad to hear recently that Ingmar Bergman, a great hero of mine, used to walk around with his mouth open as a child. So I wasn't the only one, but I would tend to kind of go off into a little trance. So on this particular day, those pigeons are not just pigeons. These are the pigeons in my Royal Private Army. They have just won a massive battle, and I am rewarding each one of them with an appropriate little piece of bread. A few weeks earlier, I'd had a really bad cold, and I was very cranky, and these same pigeons were monsters. Monsters disguised in pigeon suits, that if I did not feed properly, would come out of their suits and destroy the entire city. So it was not, it was a very responsible childhood I had at 6. And my father used to call me the Wunderkind of imagination. He saw that I had a lot of imagination. He very much supported that, and it was great. I happen to have had an older sister, 4 years older than me, who was not impressed by my amazing imagination. She was always telling me to close my mouth. And she used to call me, little kids who have older siblings here, listen to this. She used to call me the little moron. Now that, I knew I was not a moron. But when you have a sister who was 4 years older than you have to be prepared to hear something like that. Anyway, notice the clothes again, the way my mother dressed us. Like we were the children of the Tsar. the children of the king. She just loved having us in these gorgeous clothes. And all these pictures would have been lost, by the way, were lost. It's just that my mother was so proud of us and everything that she would send these pictures to her, copies of these pictures to a friend in England. And she herself had a collection of hundreds and hundreds of pictures, which were, of course, all destroyed by the Nazis. So here we are, and this is the basic family unit. My father, a very handsome gentleman who was a wonderful athlete, great skier, and also a terrific piano player. I mean, that's what he loved to do on the side. There's my sister looking adoringly at Papa. And there's my little mother, who tended to be fussy and kind of nervous and high-strung. And she would come in. I only saw my mother once or twice a day. If you came from a wealthy family, and at that point we were very well-to-do, you didn't see your parents much during the day. You were brought up by a nanny. And I had a wonderful nanny. But in the evenings, my mother would come to put my sister and me to sleep, and she would come into our bedroom, and we would recite some Hebrew prayers with her. And while we were reciting it, she would massage our fingers. And one day my sister explained to me that the reason my mother did that was because she was really tiny. I mean, really tiny. And she thought that she could help out and make sure that we had nice long hands if she massaged our fingers every day. So she was at work, right? You know. So here we are, and I want to talk about something of what it was like to be 6 years old, have a very vivid imagination, and then certain things that I was not aware of. I was not aware of politics. I was not really aware of what was going on in the world, and shadows were forming, but they did not really involve me. I was living in a little paradise world because we owned the second, because we own the second largest chocolate factory in Poland. As I get the kids to say after me, say Sushard. Sushard was the name of the factory. Sushard still exists. When I went on the March of the Living last year, we went to Warsaw, and I was traveling with these kids who had just graduated, mostly from military school, and they had heard me tell the story. And then I was walking down the street and I said, Leon, we were just in the department store, look what we found. And they were carrying like 50 bars of Milka chocolate, which was what this company was known for. It still exists in Europe, not our factories, long gone. But Sushard chocolate is apparently one of the most popular chocolates in Europe, in Germany, in Poland, everywhere. So we owned this factory, and it was a very, very privileged life. It meant that I had a full-time nanny, we had a full-time cook who just lived to make special delicacies for little Lonechek. She called me Lilichek, which used to be my high schools. But I didn't care because she really was devoted to making me happy through food. And I remember my father sometimes, who was a very sweet man and mostly smiled like you saw there. I would hear him arguing with the cook and saying, are you mad? You have just spent $25 for a pound of strawberries when they are totally out of season. And she said, yes, and I'll do it again tomorrow. I'm not going to let the little darling angel starve to death. And I would be standing there thinking, yes, you're right. I mustn't starve. so immensely spoiled and privileged. Lots of vacations, riding around in limousines, wonderful life. And one of the things I really, really loved was that when my father would come home from work, he would go to the piano. And he just loved to play the piano, and very good at it. And I would jump up on his shoulder, and we'd start a program for the day. You know, I mean, there, my wonderful voice, so much better than the voices I heard before. I would sing like, heaven, I'm in heaven, and the cares that seem to hang around me through the week seem to vanish like a gambler's lucky streak. When we're out together dancing cheek to cheek. And so here's the deal. I did not understand one word of what I was singing. The songs were in English. I spoke Polish. I spoke some German, as our family did. The records were records my father had gotten from the States, and I memorized. I must have memorized 50 songs. And so they were all in English, and we would sing. But like I say, English was still waiting to be found. It's still late in the future. At a certain point in this concert, my sister would invariably come into the room carrying homework, and saying, "Oh, Papa, could you help me? I need some help. This is very urgent." And so it would mean the concert would come to an end. But it was okay, because I knew that tomorrow Papa would come home from work, he'd get at the piano, I'd jump on his shoulder, and we'd do other songs. And there was one thing that I loved even more than jumping on my father's shoulder and singing songs. And that was this. HaShoah. Now you understand, these pictures, many of these pictures you see here were drawn by children like you. I have hundreds and hundreds of pictures. In fact, this whole thing started when I gave a talk at the Museum of Tolerance and to young kids. And I was not a Holocaust speaker. I wasn't going around telling my story. I always thought my story might be a bit irreverent. I mean, it was about a little boy and chocolate, and given what the Holocaust represents, I thought maybe it's a story I would just keep to myself. But when I shared it with kids, it was exactly what brought the kids and me together. And then they sent me drawings. That began the process. So wherever I go now and speak to children, even sometimes when I speak to adults, I urge them to send me pictures of my story. And later this year, we'll be publishing a book called Milka and Me, which will be made. Very much what you see up here on the screen will be in that book for children. So we had the factory. My father would take me, we would go in a limousine, and as soon as we got to the factory, I would steal away, and I would go to this room where they melted the chocolate. Because you can't make chocolate bars anyway without first melting the chocolate. The chocolate comes in big industrial chunks, and those are put into a metal tub, and the tub is warmed up and stirred, and then the chocolate melts. And when the chocolate melts is when they're able to pour it into whatever shapes they want. So as soon as I got away from my father, I would go there, and here I was. Listen, every child sees it differently, but here I was at the top. And I would roll up my sleeve, I was wearing a long sleeve shirt, and I would dip my arm into the top, up to my elbow. Thank you, everybody knows what that means. That's good. Yes, up to my elbow. Never would I do. How did you know? I would lick the chocolate off. Every last drop of melted milk chocolate is like, And so, and I'd lick it all off, and then I'd get a terrible stomachache, and I'd be taken home, and I would be told, what a terrible thing I'd done. I would be given the worst tasting medicine. I don't think they legally allowed it. And what did I do the next time I went to the factory? You think? Yes. Next time I went to the factory, did the same thing. And what did I do the next time? Look at this. This kid has drawn it as high as the Empire State Building. 400 steps. But that's the right feeling. I would have climbed 400 steps to get at the chocolate. And I named that tub Milka. Because Milka is the name. You'll still see it. If you go, I think the 99-cent store and World Market, many other stores have it here in Los Angeles. You can buy Milka, and it's a terrific tasting chocolate. Milka means really made of milk. And so, here I was, having my taste of Norfolk before it was ever wrapped up or put into, sold in the stores. Okay, now, I was so in love with Nona that my dream was, when I grew up, that I would dive into her every day as often as I could come there, and I would swim in the tub. Yeah, unfortunately, there was a certain man who had other ideas. We know about him, his day is very much about him. Adolf Hitler. Now, I speak to schools all over Los Angeles, or at the museums. Many of the schools I speak to are not Jewish. I speak to a lot of Catholic schools. And of course, older children know. He's the best known man in the world, by the way. That face is the most single recognizable face that I think you could show anywhere in the world, and I think people will know who he was. But of course, the children have no idea of the incredible horror that he brought to the world, okay? And as I tell the children, okay, not you adults, no, but as I tell the students, Hitler virtually hated everyone. I mean, his own very but he hated black people, he hated yellow people, he hated brown people, and most of all, he hated Jews. Yes, maniacally hated Jews, was committed to our extermination, and so here's the other side of the world. Here I am living in chocolate paradise, and 3 months after the picture was taken of me feeding the pigeons, Hitler invades Poland, and suddenly we are surrounded by Germany pouring in. Now, we were, like I said, a very well-to-do family every summer, and when I say my family, I'm talking about 14 people. My grandparents, who were just turning 70, my 2 sets of aunts and uncles were there, each had 2 children apiece, and then my father, mother, sister, and me. So there were 14 of us, and we were on vacation in a place called Zakopane, which used to be a very famous ski resort, and during the summer it was also a summer resort. And we get a telegram from the manager of the factory, and he says, "Do not come back here to Krakow. The Germans are here, and they are looking for you." Why were they looking for us? Because we were Jews, and because we were wealthy, and we had a factory, and they wanted that factory, and they wanted anything else we had. And the Germans would do that when they would invade countries in Europe, and they invaded many of them and overran them. The first thing they'd go looking for would be the wealthy Jews, and they would take away whatever they had. Most Polish Jews were very poor, very, very poor before the war. And we were lucky we had this factory. So now here we are, the Germans have invaded. They're developing Mr. Hitler again with his troops. And the family holds an emergency meeting, the grown-ups. What are we going to do? The idea is to escape, to try to escape from the Nazis. You can't go out the traditional way. Traditional way would have been to go down to a port city, take a boat. Nobody used to fly in those days. Those days you used to still take boats. You take a boat, it would take a week or 2, you would hopefully end up in America. We had an uncle in America who was already there. He had gotten there a year or 2 earlier, and he had been able to take his money and everything with him. And I don't know how we contacted him. It was probably through telegrams. He said he would somehow send us amounts of money as we were going to pay for the escape. You could not escape for free, not when you're 14 people. So he was going to help us as much as we could. And I thought, go to America, okay. This is the way the kid drew it. It was just the way I kind of visualized it. This is home, here in Poland. We climb down the side of Poland. We get into a little boat. I love boats. We're going to go to America. I loved America from the songs. So it's going to be very cool. See, we're climbing out. I like the way you climb up a ladder and you're in the promised land, okay? Now, this is what the reality was. Not getting in a little boat and climbing out. We were all the way up there. I don't know how these pointers were. But we were all at the upper top end of the map. Is Poland, barely in the picture. And if we were lucky, we would get from Poland to Lithuania, and then from Lithuania all the way across Russia, over to Japan, which is here, and then from Japan, we would go to America. That was the hope if we weren't cold. And by the way, you couldn't just leave, no cars. All the wealth, all that stuff was left behind. Overnight, we are really traveling pretty much with clothes on our backs. You know, my mother had taken, she did have some jewelry that she carried with her. I remember she sewed it into the pajamas of my sister and me, thinking that if the Nazis searched us, well, that would be the last place, maybe into our coats, it would be the last place they would ever look. That was a very smart thing to do. But now we have this amazing, amazing journey waiting for us, and I realize that I am never going back home. I want you young people here to think about that. Because after school is over today, you're going home, right? You know, maybe you want to see a friend first, but you're going home. But what happens if you were told, not only aren't you going home today, you're not going home, period. So everything you love, from your bicycle to your house, to your nanny, to your cook, to Wilco, you're never going to see again. And that's when it hit me. And I got extremely depressed and sad when I found it out. This is the way the child drew it. I think it's kind of very touching because he or she has me shedding chocolate tears here. Because Milka was so dear to me. It was something I just thought would be there my whole life, okay? So, chocolate tears for Milka, not going back, and I really do get depressed. It's like I was a sensitive kid. My nanny was more like my mother than my mother, because I spent all my time with her. Ironically, she was Catholic, and she told my mother that she was more than willing to take me with her. And I think she even said that to me, which is something you really should not say to a 6-year-old boy. Because I think if I'd had to make the choice then and there, I would have gone with her. Because she was the woman I saw all the time. But so there was that going on, and suddenly she was gone, and my poor little mother was totally overwhelmed. Totally. You know, she hadn't, before the war, she had been spoiled and pampered, and we had the cook and the chauffeurs and everything else. And now she was trying to look after 2 children, you know, and her husband and our grandmother. So I barely got to see her, and I really, really got depressed. And when I got depressed, I also, in connection with that, I'm pretty sure there was a connection, I developed a terrible, terrible ear infection. Any of you ever have ear infections? Yes? Pleasant? Fun? Ear infections are awful because they're right up here. You can't run away from them. They're right in your head. So wherever you go, the ache goes with you. My poor mother's running around at night trying to find a doctor. No doctors. They're all fleeing for their lives. We don't even have aspirin. We don't even have aspirin. And I'm lying there moaning and groaning in some cold little house somewhere, you know, without enough blankets. And the only kindness that I remember, interestingly enough, was my sister, who, we had a book. You saw that name before, Korczak, Janusz Korczak. I don't know if all of you know who he is. But he was a fabulous writer who wrote under a Polish name in Poland, and is still to this day read in Poland and very much admired. And he had written a book about a little boy who becomes a magician, a wizard. And I love that story. I thought, oh, is that cool? To become a wizard, wow. You know, that would be so great. And so she would read me that story at night. And then one night, after story time was over, and I was dreaming, I had a dream that, who appeared in my dream? Milka. You can say it louder. Yeah. Milka appeared in my dream, and she says to me, put your ear next to me. Put your ear next to the tub. And I thought, ooh, maybe you're too hot. I don't know. It's one thing to dip my elbow in the tub, but my ear, she says, put your ear against my tub. And I did. And the moment I did it, my ear started to feel better. It still hurt, but it started to feel better. And for the next 3 or 4 days, all I would concentrate was putting my ear against milk. And my ear got better and better, and after about 4 days, it was healed. And my mother said, it's a miracle. It is a miracle. And without medicines or anything, Leon's ear is healed. I thought, well, it's a kind of miracle. It's not a kind of miracle I'm going to discuss, but it is, yes, it was a miracle. And so, but then other things happened. I had a dream. I have about 10 different versions of this picture, and I don't know which one to use. This, because you can't see his mustache here, is Hitler. He was chasing me up the stairs. Hitler was chasing me up a staircase, and on top of the staircase was Milka. And Milka was bubbling hot in this dream, hot as lava, just bubbling up. I ran up there, and just in the nick of time, I upended her, and the children went down the stairs on Hitler, and his clothes caught on fire, and he was screaming, and he rolled dead to the bottom of the stairs. And in my dream, 6-year-old me had defeated the most evil, most powerful man on earth. How was that? That was very good, very, very, very pleasing. But then there was real-life ramifications to what was going on with Milka. Because a few days later, and this, if any of you do a drawing of this particular scene, I would invite you to do it with a lot more hay in it. Because actually, there was a lot of hay in that hay wagon. See, we were being smuggled out. We were being smuggled out by the equivalent of coyotes. You hear about coyotes all the time, right? It seems so exotic. They're smuggling poor Mexicans and South American people here to America. Well, there were Jewish coyotes. Jewish coyotes who you paid money to, and they would take you 20 miles, and then you would pay them some more money to the next one, and he would take you 40 miles, and that's how the family was slowly escaping from Poland. Also, we could not escape together. You can't have 14 people escaping together. They just draw too much attention to themselves. So we would break up into small groups. In this group, it's my aunt, my mother, me, and my cousin, who was also 6 years old. And the German officer says, are you hiding anything in that hay? And my mother says, no. And I knew that that was not true, because just before we had set out on this journey, my mother had taken a precious prayer book that was a gift from her father, that she carried with her everywhere, and she had stuck it into the hay. Now the soldiers, in reality, they're not here like that in this drawing. There were like 3 or 4 soldiers. They each had guns with bayonets. You know what a bayonet is? Yeah. Okay, so it's like a knife attached to the end of the gun. And they were searching through the hay with these bayonets, with these guns. And if they had found the prayer book, what would have happened? We would have been killed. I mean, we might have been sent back and put somewhere, but the likelihood is that they would have killed us on the spot. I would not be here telling you this story. So what happened was, as they were searching for the prayer book that I knew was there, without thinking about it, I put my hand to my ear and I said, Milka, make sure the Germans do not find my mother's prayer book. Did they find it? No. No, again. Like I said, I'm standing here, they had. And we got away from there, and my mother said, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. They searched and searched. I was sure we were dead. It's a miracle. And I thought, yes, it's a kind of miracle. It starts with an N. And so we continued on. And then a few nights later, I was in a sled with my parents and my sister. We were going at night, like about 30 degrees below zero. Oh, excuse me. So, my conclusion was, if this had worked, if I had been able to sweep Hitler down the stairs with melted children, if I was able to get my ear healed because of Milka, and Milka was a magic tongue. She had magic powers. And if I told her what to do and she listened to me, if I told her, sorry, this doesn't help. If I told her what to do and she listened to me, what did that make me? Yes, cheetah, because you saw the next picture. I decided I was a wizard. I was a wizard, and that I had the power to help save my family. 6-year-old me thought there are things I can do that nobody else can do, and maybe that's going to help out. And indeed, a few nights later, we were on a sled at night, being pulled through this 30-degree, minus 30-degree weather. It was so cold. I remember there were like icicles hanging down from the scarf that my mother had wrapped around my head. And family was scared. Wolves would come out, they'd hurt us, they'd eat us, whatever. And I put my hand to the ear, the same ear that had been infected. And I said, Milka, make sure that the wolves do not bother us. And we got through. They did not, no one ever showed his face. All we heard was the howling of the wolves, which is very scary, believe me, in the middle of the night. A few nights later, we were in Lithuania by now. We were sleeping in an abandoned hut, and there's all 14 of us trying to settle down for the night. And the doors of the hut fly open, and there are 3 Lithuanian soldiers. Lithuania at that time in history was very, very anti-Semitic, the government, right? We know the word, anti-Jewish, not friendly. There were probably 5 Jews in the entire Lithuanian army. And it turned out, I put my hand to my ear, I said, Milka, make sure these soldiers don't hurt the family. And 5 minutes later, my father is talking to one of these soldiers. Why? Because he's Jewish. And they're talking because they're speaking in Yiddish. You all know what Yiddish is, yes? All right. So my father didn't speak Lithuanian. The Lithuanian soldier didn't speak Polish, but they both spoke Yiddish. So they were able to talk, and the next thing I know, my father is giving the soldier his wristwatch, and my uncle comes over with this jug of vodka and pouring liberal amounts of vodka for these 3 soldiers, and one of the soldiers starts to play a harmonica, and they sing, and they dance, and they leave. We were supposed to be dead, you know, captured. At the very least, what the Lithuanians used to do, so if they caught you, is they would send you back to the Germans. But that didn't happen. And I thought, you know what? The time has come for me to let my family know what I am doing that is keeping us alive. You know? So, that's a big deal. You're 6 years old, you got this little squeaky voice, and but everybody was there. I wasn't ever going to tell anybody this was the time to do it. And there was a bucket, and I started to climb up on the bucket, but the bucket was covered with ice. This drawing is not really accurate because I fell forward. This person, this child, has me falling backwards. So if anybody wants to do a picture of me on the bucket falling forward, I would probably replace this picture. But the point is, I fell forward, my head hit against some sharp object on the ground, and this stream of blood keeps shooting out of my head. Just like the whales, when you get the geyser of blood, have you seen that? It was blood coming out like that because I'd opened up, I guess, the main artery up here. And I tell the kids, if they want to be sure, they can come and check my scarf. I have my scar after the talk. So the last time I talked, yes, thank you. He said, here's your water for the shop. No, he didn't say that. He didn't say that.
I was going to bring you some milk up, but...
No. That's right. Thank you. I have a bottle of water here. I never got around to opening and drinking it. So here's the deal. The blood shoots out of my forehead. My mother goes, "Oh, my little darling is dying, boy!" And then people start pouring ice cold water in my face. And I think I'm drowning. It was the worst thing. My sister girl comes by and says, "I still miss you, mate, you little moron." You know. And so I thought to myself at that moment, I realized, if you're going to be a wizard, especially if you're a little boy and you're a wizard, do not try to tell anybody about it. Certainly do not tell your parents that you are a wizard. You can tell them, but don't be surprised if they lock you in your room for 5 days. No, I realized I could never tell anybody again, I never did get to tell them because I fell. But so, if I was going to be a wizard, then I would just keep it to myself. I also thought that my duties as a wizard maybe were coming to an end, because we got to Lithuania, we didn't smuggle, and we got to this place here called Vilnius. Yes? Ooh, that's like the main city in Lithuania. Poland and Lithuania, that part of Europe, had been all divided by Hitler and Russia, who were not fighting each other yet. Hitler said to the Soviet Union, "You take this half, we'll take this half." But the Russians were not into the business of persecuting Jews, and there was not that heavy military occupation of Germans, which was on that other side in Poland, where we had escaped from. So we were going to be okay. I was put in a school, and but what I noticed was that my parents and the grown-ups were still very nervous, and they kept talking about this thing called a transit visa. I had no idea what a transit visa was, and I asked my sister, who knew all these things, and she explained that if we were going to get out of Lithuania and keep going and get across to the Soviet Union, to Russia, on a trip across, you could only do it with a transit visa. You could not just smuggle your way across. Russia was way too big. You couldn't go in sleds at night. You had to go on a train. The only way you could do that was if you had a transit visa. And they kept talking about it and talking about it. And one day I put my hand to my ear and I said, "Milka, whatever it takes, make sure my parents get a transit visa." Okay? And about a week later, my father goes to the place where tobacconist, because he was a heavy smoker, to buy himself some cigarettes. And the guy who runs the store, who's Jewish, says to my father, "You're not going to believe it. There's a guy here who is giving out transit visas to Jews." I said, "Well, how's that possible? The government refuses to do it." He's not part of the government. He's Japanese. Japanese, yeah. He's part of the Japanese consulate. Every country has its own consulate offices in every other country. So he works for the Japanese government. He is doing this strictly, apparently, out of the goodness of his heart. He's giving out these transit visas, and his name is Chiune Sugihara. Okay, great hero. Greater hero than Schindler, because Schindler, although he saved a lot of people, actually also used them as slave labor. This man gets nothing from doing this. In fact, his government, when they find out about it, are going to be very angry and they're going to take him out of his job. But he does it as fast as he can, with his wife helping him. And my father comes from there. And again and again, every day, there are hundreds of families saying, "Please, please, please let us have a visa." And finally, my father sleeps over one night so that he's there early in the morning and he's given this. He's given this. And here, let me pause for just a second. Because see? That's it. This piece of paper is why I'm standing here today. because Shiumi Sugihara gave enough of these to my father so that our family could continue our journey. But before that happened, stepping back just a few steps, I was going to school, and that was my sorry, sister. And here it was. I want you to see that because this is my class in Lithuania. Now, these are all Jewish Lithuanian children. Okay? You see where I am, right? And there's a friend of mine, I'll tell you about it in a moment. What I want to say to you is that statistically, of this whole class you see here, maybe 3 children were alive by the end of the war. It meant that all these children had been murdered. Now look at them, there's kids like you. I mean, it was an earlier time, they dressed differently, but sweet kids. I could not play with them because they didn't speak Polish, they only spoke Lithuanian. But that little boy in the front, whose name was Oleg, he spoke Polish, his mother was Polish, and he was a wonderful, mischievous kid. And I was very well brought up, so he did mischievous things with me. We went into the school, I shouldn't be telling it to you kids, early one morning before the school opened, and he drew a picture of the teacher on a broomstick, right on the blackboard, and things like that. So I really loved it, but it occurred to me one day, after we'd gotten these transit visas, that what was he doing? Did he have transit visas? When were they getting out of Lithuania? And I'd asked him, he didn't know anything about it, nothing. He didn't even hear of transit visas, he didn't know about the urgency of getting out. And I said, listen, you've got to go home, talk to your family, tell them if they don't get transit visas and get out of here, when the Germans come, and they will come, I was just repeating what my sister had told me, then you'll be dead. So he went home, talked, and told his father. And the next morning he came to school, and he looked awful. He looked like he'd been up all night crying. And I said, what happened? He said, I told my father what you said, and my father said, only cowards run away. Only cowards run away. I have my business here. You go to school here. My grandparents are buried in a cemetery here. I am not leaving Vilna. We are going to stay here. This craziness will blow over, which is what a lot of people unfortunately thought. And not only that, but he slapped me in the face. So I felt awful because we were leaving in a few more days. And I thought, what can I do to save him? What can I do to save him? And that night, I had a dream where I was sleeping, but that's supposed to be me sleeping in the foreground. And we were it was an open field. Milka was there. Milka always solved everything. And then there was gunshots, and Oleg and his parents came running out of the woods, followed by German soldiers. You're supposed to see them in the upper top there. But something terrible happened. Before they could get to Milka, and I don't know what Milka was going to do to them. She's a magic tub. They'd climb into her. Maybe they'd be protected. It's a dream. Maybe they'd be protected from the bullets. Maybe she would fly away with them. She started to rise like a helium balloon. And they were not there yet. And I said, Milka, stop, wait for them. She wouldn't wait. She went higher and higher. And by the time Oleg and his parents got to the top, they could not reach her. And they were jumping and jumping and jumping and trying to grab hold of her. And they couldn't, and the Germans kept shooting, and they were killed. That was my dream. And I woke up so angry and so confused. I said, Milka, what did you do? You should have waited for them. The whole idea was for you to protect them. And what? To show off, to show me that you could fly? You went up and they couldn't reach you? I hate you. I totally hate you. I never, ever, ever want to see you again. I felt so betrayed because this was my best magical too, but my best friend, closer to me than any person that I knew. And so, a day or two later, we left by train. We had our transit visas. We went to Moscow, My father showed me and my sister around Moscow. I didn't notice anything. All I could think about was Milka. All I could think about was Milka, and a few days later, we got on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Do you know what the Trans-Siberian Railroad is? It's a train that takes you across the length of the Soviet Union, the length of Russia. In those days, it took almost 14 days, okay, and nights on one train, just in case you feel you've been on a train for 2 hours and you're getting impatient and restless. 14 days, 14 nights, and cold. I mean, it was heated, but just a little bit. We had a tiny little compartment. My parents slept down below, and then 2 shelves opened up at the top, which is where my sister and I slept. And the first night, I went to a little, you had to go down the corridor of the train, which was always, rocking, to a little place where you could use the toilet and brush your teeth. And I looked out the window, and who's there? This picture, for some reason, is going out of focus. But Milka, I saw Milka, which didn't make sense. I'd never seen Milka except in my dreams. But here was Milka, physical Milka, following the train. And I was really confused, upset, a little scared, because I thought, obviously nobody else but me could see her. And I thought, well, maybe I'm going crazy. I don't know what this is. There she was, the train was going, Milka was following, and my father picked up that I was upset the next morning, and he said, let's have a little talk, and let's take a little walk. Now, taking a walk on the Trans-Siberian Railroad is this. We would walk down that narrow corridor to the end of the corridor, and then talking, and then we would turn around, and then we would walk this way, talking, and then we would turn around. So that was the walk. And my father said, what is bothering you? You're upset. I said, Dad, what do you do? What do you do if your best friend double crosses you? What do you do if your best friend betrays you? My father said, well, the first thing I would do is I would make sure that they really didn't betray me. I said, no, absolutely. There's no question they betrayed me. So my father said, well, in that case, what I would do is I would get rid of that friend. I wouldn't hang out with them anymore. I said, yeah, but what if you get rid of them and they follow you? And my father got concerned because there were a lot of other refugee children on the train. We were not the only family that was escaping. And he wondered who could be following me. And then he got it. He said, the wunderkind of imagination. This is something you've made up, right? I said, well, I don't know. He said, what you have to do, you created your friend, now you're going to uncreate him, okay? So you tell your friend that you no longer want him in your mind, you no longer want to think about him anymore, you're done. And that night, when I went to do my evening ritual in the little bathroom, and there was Milka. I said, Milka, we are done, okay? I know, look, maybe that was just a dream. I don't know what happened. I don't know if Oleg is alive or dead, but I know that whatever we've done till now is over. I'm going to a part of the world where there are not going to be any more Nazis, any more Germans, and you can't come with me, okay? So we have to say goodbye. And then later in the night, I woke up and I looked, and Milka was gone. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry because I was relieved she was gone, and I knew that I had just let go of somebody very, very important to me in my life. But there wasn't that much time to think about these things. Because now, we got to the edge there. Can you see Japan? I think one of those 50-foot long sticks. See it? We got to Japan, and we couldn't go to the United States. We had learned as we were traveling that America was not very eager to let Jewish refugees in at that time. Sorry to say, it was not what the Statue of Liberty says. We hold our arms open. At that time, they were being very stingy about how many Jewish refugees they would let in. So we had to go to Canada, and wait till an opening came so we could come to America. So we go to Canada, and here's what happens. We're in Canada. I do not speak any English. No English. What are the kids speaking? English. As one kid recently said, Canadian. Yeah, that's English. So I can't keep up with what they're saying. I think the kids are geniuses. And at the school, this is what the Canadian boys are wearing. They're called joppers. Joppers. They look like riding pants. I don't know why they exist like that for boys to wear. The sides come out way out. It's supposed to be very cool. Way, way out. And I am wearing short pants and woolen stockings. And I go home, I say, Mother, I look like a total nerd. I can't do this. I can't go to school looking like this. They're all laughing at me. So my poor mother has to run around to all these social services, and she gets me the right kind of pants. And so finally, okay, I can be one of the kids. My English isn't very good, but at least I can look good. And then about a week or two later, we get word that we're finally going to be allowed into the United States. And what are the boys wearing in the United States? They're not wearing joppers, they're wearing knickers. Why are boys in Canada wearing joppers, and why are Americans boys wearing knickers? Who knows? Fashion. And I go home, I say, Mom, I look like a total freak with these pants that come out at the sides. I need to have the right pants. So my mother finally got me the right pants. But just before we left Canada, something happened. They had a dentist come to the school. It's amazing to me that in 1940, they could have a dentist come to a public school and check the kids' teeth. And it turned out that I had a tooth that had to be extracted. So they gave me a note to take home to get my parents to sign. And the next day, they were going to take it out. So what do I do? How do I spend my night? What do I do? Yes, what are those called? Pliers, yes. The old universal pliers, you know, to remove teeth. And I was so scared and I was so worried about it that I almost broke my word and tried to get Milka to show up again, somebody to help me. But before I got to that point, I remembered that on the train, on the Trans-Siberian train, there was an old Jewish man, and he was telling us stories about the New World, what was waiting for us when we got to Canada or the United States. And he said, in the New World, when you have to have a tooth extracted, they don't yank it out of your head. What they do is they feel the muscles on the back of your neck, the nerves and the muscles. The dentist presses here very carefully, and when he finds the right nerve, he pushes on it, and the tooth pops out. Is that great? I mean, yes, America, of course. Canada. No, I don't have to worry. So the next morning, I go to the school where they set up this little dental office, and I'm about this big, you know, my English is still very poor, and I say to this big lady dentist, I say, push, 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 push. And she looks at me and she says, no, she says, pull, pull, pull. And I learned a lesson, which is there may be a brave new world with wonderful things in it, but when it comes to teeth, it's still those pliers, teeth have got to come out. Not anymore. So, but we arrived in America, and there was nothing like this in Europe. Poland didn't look like this. Russia didn't look like this. Japan didn't look like this. This was like a magic place. I fell in love with it the moment I saw it, overwhelming as it was. And we got a little apartment on the Upper West Side of New York. That whole apartment, which was 2 rooms, was as big as mine and my sister's bedroom had been in Krakow. But who cared? We weren't going to be chased anymore. We were so relieved that we had finally come to the end of the line. And I remember the first night, as my father was putting us to bed, I remember saying to him, asking him, I said, is this it? And he liked the way that sounded. It sounded very American to him. Is this it? He said, yes, this is it. Meaning, the running is over. For our journey, which before the war, remember I told you we would take a boat, would have taken 2 weeks, had taken us a year and a half. With stopovers at places, a year and a half. And now we're finally home. We're finally at home in America, where we would be safe. But it wasn't the sound of music, because, you know, the toll of the war now began to come back to me. At night, I would hear a police siren or a fire truck, and I would get immediately scared that the Germans were coming. And I would have dreams of them catching us with the prayer book and killing us. And horrible, horrible dreams about what had happened to us, you know, during that time. And so it got so bad that I finally did reach out to Milka, and I said, Milka, I don't know, you can still hear me, you still exist. See if you can help me. I don't know what to even ask you. And sure enough, I had a dream about Milka. Now this is the last dream. In this dream, Milka was as bigger than your whole school campus here. She was enormous. I couldn't see to the far end of her. And she said, take off your pajamas and climb into me. Which had been my dream, as you remember, as a little boy in Poland. But you know what? You can't swim in chocolate. I got in there, and it was all sticky, and I said, I can't swim. She said, oh, you can't swim in chocolate. And she turned into water, and it was a huge lake. And she said, now swim. And I said, where am I supposed to swim to? She said, I don't know. See that island over there? It's great. It was drawn by a California kid, so I don't think that's the kind of island I would have imagined back in 1941. But okay. She said, swim towards that island. The point is, swim, because swimming, whether you like actual swimming or not, is something you can only do using your own strength, your own arm and legs. Nobody else can swim for you. You have to swim for yourself. And so, this little boy, you know, who had been brought up with all the comforts and privileges of nannies and everything else, was taught a lesson about learning how to swim. And I have swum. I have swum for the rest of my life. I'm very blessed. Here's me in that same place. Different pigeons, but me feeding the pigeons. 7 years later, I got I'd like to see the house I was born in. What I don't have attached here, and I'm just going to put it out. I might get some questions from kids, but to end the story, last week, just a week ago, I was invited by the Museum of Talmuds to come there to welcome the grandnephew of Chiuni Sugihara, the guy who had saved our lives with this. He was here in America for 4 days, and we welcomed him at the museum. And before he came, my wife and I went hunting around, and we found some Luca chocolate bars, and we put them in a little bowl. My wife put a little yellow ribbon around the bowl. And at the end of first he spoke, he doesn't speak any English, so this young Japanese girl translated for him. And then I gave this program that I just shared with you, to 200 adults who loved it. Adults found it just as interesting as I hope. Oh my God, they're all asleep. No. So it was a great honor, and you know, somebody said recently, they said, if you want to have a very rich, full life, what's the secret? And the person said, live a long time. And then you'll get to experience. So I have been blessed and allowed to live a long time. I am thrilled that I've been able to share my story with you on Yom HaShoah, and I would like to open up the floor for questions. So, but before we open up the floor for questions,
so much. We're gonna get some questions from them to ask you. Okay, perfect. So thank you. We have time for a couple of questions. So if there's a question that you would like to ask, Roy?
But wait a minute, please stand up and say it in a really loud way. Thank you.
What happened after you swam in?
What happened after I swam in Milka? I realized that what was happening was that Milka was showing me that I could swim on my own, that I had the strength in me, in my body, to keep swimming. And whether I got to that island or not was almost not important. What was important was that whatever life presented me with, which in all our lives are good things and bad things and sad days and happy days, to keep swimming. Okay? Yes, please stand up though when you say it loud.
Did you ever realize why Milka started flying instead of saving your friend?
When Milka started flying instead of saving your friend in that
Yeah.
forest, what do you think that meant?
Did I feel?
Did you ever realize why?
No, I mean, I've thought about it later on. I think, but I can't be sure of that Milka really felt that I had to begin to realize that there were certain things that could not be done by magic thoughts, you know. So she was not going to listen to what I was saying. Yes, please.
I think your friend was in Lithuania, I think they would call it.
Yes, yes.
Was he actually from Lithuania?
You know, I think he was. We looked after the war. We made all kinds of searches. We were not able. Just so you guys will know, after World War II, Europe was upside down. It wasn't like today, you go on Google, and like in 2 minutes you're on Facebook, and in 3 minutes you find. It took my father 2 years to find out what had happened to his own family. My father had 5 brothers, 4 of them were murdered by the Nazis. But it took him 2 years before he had all that information. But we think, statistically speaking, we couldn't find him, and I think he was killed. Yes, please.
Deborah, and then we're going to wrap up with this question.
Just wondering, when you came to America, your parents were very well off, and your dad had successful business. What did they do here? What did your dad end up doing here?
Oh, thank you. It's a good question. When we got here, we were not well off at all because we had lost everything. And Uncle, the one who was here, set up a small chocolate factory so that my father and my uncles would have a place to live. But no more chauffeurs, no more nannies. No more.
Rabbi Yoshi, are you going to end us finish with a song? So when we finish and you go back to class, later today in your class, either in your homeroom or in Judaic studies, we're going to have a chance to do some reflection, some writing, some drawings. Hopefully you'll have a chance to do some drawings, and we'll have a chance to share some of those. So I'm going to turn this back over to Rabbi Yoshi.
So we're going to all stand, and we'll have the opportunity to conclude our Tekes Yom HaShoah with words of Hatikva. And one of the amazing things about being able to spend this time with Leon is to get to hear his story and to learn more about the experience of one person that is our experience. We are part of your family, and we are part of your story, and you took us in a very powerful way through some of the incredible moments that you experienced as an individual and as a member of a family. So we're grateful to you for your time today. We're grateful to Mrs. Clement and Rabbi Noble and everybody who helped to bring you here and to make this possible. And we're very thankful to live in a time where, despite all the challenges in the world, and despite the reality of anti-Semitism, which continues today, and hatred that isn't just focused on Jews, there's all sorts of hatred in the world, there's still lots to be hopeful for, like we started our Tekes with. And one of the things that gives us hope and strength is that there's Medinat Israel, there's the state of Israel today, where we know the lives of Jews and the values that Jews care about can be celebrated and protected. So when we sing these words, we're filled with hope, and we hope that never again will anyone have to experience the dramatic and challenging things that you experienced, and instead we can live lives of chocolate and milka and joy and sweetness.
Toda rabah. Thank you. I wish everyone a good day.